Hello and welcome to the second channel for Tales from the Trip. I'm your host Tripkeeper, and on today's video we're going to be doing some sort of like spin-off of the Frightening Trip Reports to Fall Asleep to series. We're going to do obscure horror trip reports to fall asleep to. You heard that right. Whatever I'm going to name it, I don't know yet. This is just I'm just naming something right like that. But yeah, we got a couple stories here that are, substances that no one really talks about that often. Clearly, I don't think I've actually ever done any of these on my channel. So I think this could be actually a pretty fun series. A shout out to the person in the community post that recommended this. I was actually, I was wondering what to do, and I was like, it just felt right to do this. It just felt right to do an obscure trip reports. But yeah, I got to do some more wacky videos though, because you can't just have trip reports to fall asleep. You got to have some weird ass, top 5 Latino women, ranking shit. But hey, but before I start, I just have something to say to all my haters. All right. Yeah. So if you don't like my burping, pissing, whatever, get out of here. We don't need you. No, okay. Just a joke, guys, but please laugh. Please laugh. No. But let's get into this because there's going to be some long-ass stories here. Where I think we've just evolved into just reading the longest stories possible now. I used to just grab like a lot of smaller stories, but yeah, I might as well, read the longer ones. I didn't want to do that because I didn't want these videos to be that long, but they're pretty much better to be that way because I'm like thinking about, I gotta spend the rest of my night relaxing, but this is actually kind of relaxing to me. Lets me get off some shit off my chest and be myself for a little bit, and you can't really do that in the real world. Well, I try to be, but there's sometimes you cannot be yourself. Like, I would not be doing this at work or anything. I'm not gonna be farting and fucking pissing. Well, I do piss at work, of course. I mean, who doesn't, right? You don't piss at work? Dude, you are weird. How do you not piss at work? Dude, you gotta go. The union gives us bathroom breaks, and there's some fucking idiots at our job who pee in the tubs, like in the back of their truck or in a bottle or something. It's like so fucking nasty. They fought for us to get those bathroom breaks so we could take them whenever we want. Like they literally, the management cannot say we're doing something wrong if we're using the bathroom. Like the people that hurry up and do the route super fast, you guys can fuck off. Those are the worst people ever. But yeah. All right, let's get into this. I don't know if I'm going to read the last one because these ones are actually pretty long, and the last one's not too long, but I don't know where we're going to be at, so we'll take a look, and I'll probably save it for next time if I don't get to it tonight. But yeah, this is Obscure Trip Reports, Volume 1. Now, I wanted to do this one on my main channel, but I don't know. I just didn't feel like doing this. I don't know why. But now it's a perfect video for it to happen. But this is an Ibogaine trip report. My experience doing Ibogaine in Mexico to break a heavy kratom addiction. Sounds interesting enough. Ibogaine is basically a psychedelic that you can take to get you clean off of whatever you're taking. Like in this case, kratom. Usually not for stuff like kratom, but more stronger stuff, stronger opioids and stuff. That's what they usually use it for. But hey, heavy kratom addiction isn't no joke, or ain't no joke, isn't no joke, same thing, whatever. But all right, let's get this started. I've already talked way too long, and I'm sure the normies have already clicked off, which I was hoping for that to happen. So if you're still staying, yeah, I appreciate you guys. Little background. I've been struggling with an addiction to kratom ever since the pandemic started. At my worst, I'd use around 150 grams per day. Holy shit. I've tried tapering. I've tried quitting cold turkey. Sometimes I'd succeed for a few months, but I'd always relapse. 150 grams per day, if you guys didn't know that about kratom, that's a lot. That's a shit ton. Where's my phone at? Oh, well, it's missing. Oh, well. Don't need it. After arriving at the clinic, they put me on morphine for 3 days while the kratom left my system. Then the day of my flood dose, they pulled me off of it. It's very important you be in full withdrawal when you first take the Ibogaine. Well, I forgot about that. Yeah, that is true. Otherwise, it has to compete for access to your opiate receptors and won't reset your tolerance. A few hours before my first dose, they hooked me up to an IV to make sure all my electrolytes were at good levels. I couldn't stand laying in bed with opiate withdrawals though, so I ended up pacing around the dining room table at the clinic, pushing the IV tower on wheels around with me. Something about the pacing helped take the edge off of my withdrawals until it was time for my first dose. Finally, they hooked me up to an EKG and started dosing me with Ibogaine. They slowly ramped my dose up over several hours to make sure my heart responded well to it. Ultimately, the total dose they gave me was about 700 milligrams. It was worth noting because usually most clinics give anywhere from 1 to 1.5 grams depending on your body weight. But I have an abnormal EKG, benign early repolarization, which is thought to be harmless, but they kept me low out of an abundance of caution. For the record, my heart did fine with it, and my EKG was completely normal for me the whole time. Didn't budge at all. So I'm laying in bed hooked up to an EKG. They give me a pill. I wait an hour. They give me another pill. I wait an hour. They give me a third pill. I wait an hour. And finally, around when they gave me the fourth and final pill, I started to feel something. It began as mostly a body sensation, a tingly sort of warmth. As that warm feeling grew, my withdrawals improved until I didn't feel in pain anymore. I started yawning a lot for some reason. I began to feel dissociated in a way very reminiscent of ketamine, but also felt a nice stimulated mental euphoria. These feelings continued to build. Usually I get nervous on a come up, but I felt very calm and centered. As these feelings begin to build, I close my eyes and they start playing traditional Boidi music for me. Boidi? I don't know. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. I probably totally did. The next thing I noticed was my thoughts getting more loose and fluid. I became very childlike in my thinking. I distinctly remember mentally referring to the music as my happy, fun playtime music in my internal dialogue. I had this distinct nostalgic sense of being like a baby in a nursery. I didn't feel like I was bracing for an intense trip. I felt like a kid on his way for a play date. It was a very joyful, enthusiastic sort of mental state. One weird thing about Iboga, wait, let me make sure I got that right. Or is it Iboga? Iboga. Yeah, if you look it up, you'll see the therapy. Iboga. Oh god, am I pronouncing Ibogaine wrong too?
Ibogaine.
Ibogaine? Is that really how you pronounce it? Oh my, let me go at the Merriam-Webster.
Ibogaine.
Oh my god. Roast me in the comments. I had no idea. I guess I never bothered to look it up. Iboga. Okay, Ibogaine, Iboga. I'm so sorry, guys. You want me to reread it? No, I'm kidding. Alright. Sorry that took way too long to do that. One weird thing about Iboga. Wait, let me go back and make sure that's right.
Iboga.
I just want to be sure. Alright. One weird thing about Iboga, at least at the dose I took, is that it has 0 open eye visuals, but extremely intense closed eye visuals. You can be peeking, tripping absolute balls and open your eyes and suddenly feel more or less sober. The visuals were extremely unique from any other psychedelic I have ever done. They had a distinctly digital look to them, like a wireframe model or a neon cross stitch, with a clear shimmer between the lines implying a 3D shape to everything. They weren't traditionally geometric, although a lot of what I saw resembled a similar aesthetic to a lot of African masks. Overall, they weren't true hallucinations, but they felt a lot closer to a true hallucination than a traditional psychedelic visual, usually representing some kind of in-real-life object, not just a geometric pattern. So are we talking about fractals here, or something just geometric patterns? Very cool though. Fractals are pretty badass. You gotta look into fractals though, because that's what our world is made up of, and that's just what the true world is, and our brain blocks it out until we point it out. We take it, and it just intensifies with these psychedelics and DMT especially. The visuals begin very slowly in the center of my closed eye vision, and over an hour grew until they filled with the bulk of what I could see. They resembled a sort of carousel or the edge of a jungle, a sort of horizon, filled with plants and animals and all kinds of faces. This is where it looked the most like African masks. all moving in time with the music, and the overall mass of objects was spinning. Different parts would grow and shrink. The plants would shrink back as the mass grew larger and looked me right in the eyes. Then the mass would shrink back as a giraffe popped its head out of the forest and grew larger and larger. No individual object had a sense of being an entity the same way you get with, say, DMT, even though they looked and even somewhat behaved like entities. Rather, the overall collective had a sort of hive mind. It felt like I was interacting with different aspects of one being, or one spirit reflected through different lenses. I saw visions of the first cell evolving all the way through history until it became a person, and then an alien, and then backward through every stage until it was one cell again. I saw a strange mass of beings that were neither plants nor animals nor fungi, but rather some bizarre hybrid of all three, all breeding with each other. The edges dying off and crumbling to dust as the center birthed new members to fill their ranks. I also saw a lot of cosmic imagery, nebulae and planets and stars and black holes. This sounds like a badass trip, if I say so myself. Wait, okay. Ibogaine. Okay, I just want to make sure I got that right. Okay, we got it. Another weird thing about Ibogaine versus every other psychedelic I've ever done. I should note here that I've done almost every other psychedelic. I'm not going to list them all, but name one and odds are fairly high I've done it. Is the auditory hallucination. Usually for me, the auditory aspect is very minor if it's present at all in very high doses. My internal voice might sound a little different. Music might get enhanced, but that's about it. Ibogaine, on the other hand, had me hearing voices as though they were in the room. I couldn't tell the difference between the things I was hearing and actual sounds. I could mentally ask questions and get answers. I distinctly remember asking, "How does God feel about humanity?" and getting an answer back. You know how you feel when you're on a hike and see a cool bug? You don't love the bug, but you stop and notice it and think, "That's a cool bug," and are happy for a moment. That's how God loves your people. Upon getting that answer, my trip changed to be filled with very human-centric imagery. I saw an African village and people dancing around a fire. I saw flashes of humanity at its best and its worst. It was like I could see the totality of our nature, and for the first time appreciate us for all of our deeply flawed humanness. I was able to regard humanity the way I regard cool bugs. Usually I have a fairly negative outlook on our species. Who doesn't? Eventually, a second stage of the trip began, definitely by very hypnotic daydreams. For those experienced with meditation, sensory deprivation, I found these to be extremely similar to float tank hallucinations. I'd see various scenes with various characters, little morality plays, all kinds of stories, only some of it really making sense. By this point, I wasn't really actively thinking or trying to control my mind anymore, but if I made an effort to imagine something, it would get added to whatever the current scene was in some way. It was all very nonspecific and had a fuzzy vagueness, almost like you were looking at it from the corner of your mind's eye. While during the first part of the trip, I could look directly at something and would get more emphasized and focused. Now, everything was too slippery, and if I tried to focus on any one thing, it would change before I could. Again, extremely childlike. I felt almost as though I was watching cartoons. How much longer we got here? Oh my god, yeah, this is a long story. Well, I'm probably halfway through. Oh god, now I lost my spot. Okay, now here's the third thing that's very different about Ibogaine. I had to remember there, compared to other psychedelics. For me at least, the come down is where most of the psychological material of the trip came into play. I didn't really get many insights or new ideas that stuck with me from the main trip. But the come down over the next 3 days permanently changed my perspective in a very big way. So after tripping all night, the sun rose and I got up and sat on that couches in the main communal living room of the clinic, only to find I could not hold still. I had the worst restless leg of my entire life. I looked like someone with severe Parkinson's. I had such a hard time sitting still. The once pleasant euphoric high began to give way to something more overstimulated and unpleasant, like when you take Adderall to study for a test and just really want to sleep but can't. My thinking turned very dark and negative, and my body began to feel more and more uncomfortable. It wasn't the same feeling as my usual kratom withdrawals, and I didn't have any physical withdrawal symptoms, but it was easily the most uncomfortable I've ever felt. I felt as though someone had removed my skin. A cool breeze on my arm physically hurt. The sensation of the couch against my body was painful. I felt like a connection of raw nerve endings all screaming in pain. That's actually pretty insane right there. Like, you got to think with this Ibogaine, you know, you're gonna want to stop doing these drugs. I feel like it's doing its job. You know, it's definitely. Honestly, I would definitely stop taking kratom after doing that. That's for fucking sure. All right. Then I remembered the night before how I had paced to deal with the opiate withdrawals before my flood dose. So I decided to go for a walk. And sure enough, I found as long as I was in motion, I was okay. I was still in extreme discomfort, but for whatever reason, if I was walking, I could bear it. If I tried to sit down, I couldn't stand it. That was a good one. So I began walking laps around the building. To give you a sense of scale, each lap was a similar distance as the circumference of a football field. I tried listening to music, but it didn't really click, so I started looking up YouTube videos about Ibogaine, listening to everything I could find. Eventually, I listened to a clip from a podcast of Hamilton Morris talking about his experience doing Ibogaine in a traditional Bawidi ceremony in Africa, and suddenly some things began to click. Now I need to know how to pronounce Bawidi. Oh god, it's not in Merriam, so we're just have to go with it. I'm sorry. In the Bawidi tradition, a huge part of the ritual is feats of endurance and deprivation from comfort and coping mechanisms. You don't eat for 5 days. You don't sleep for 5 days. The only water you get is an iboga tea, so you are constantly redosing. You dance in a circle for 12 hours straight, or play a rattle for hours and hours and hours. There are different ways to conceptualize the point of this. In a very literal sense, you can argue movement helps relieve the unpleasant physical sensations the same way I experience with my pacing. But in a more metaphorical, abstract sense, in that podcast, Hamilton related it to the idea of breatharianism. Breatharianism? All right. The fake spiritual practice that one can survive without food or water just by relying on the breath. I'm gonna try that. He made it clear that breatharianism is dangerous and fake, but it's also an incredibly empowering idea that everything you need is within you, and that you have reserves of energy that you can find within yourself to overcome obstacles, and that these Bawidi traditions help teach a similar sort of self-reliance and confidence in a way that help people to get sober. Alright. I conceptualized it a little differently. What I realized is how often in difficult situations we think to ourselves, oh my god, this is horrible. There's no way I could possibly do this. And yet, we do it anyway. Like say I got into an ice bath and stayed in as long as I could, and it was 5 minutes. But then I did it again, this time with a gun pointed to my head to the threat of death if I didn't do 10 minutes. The ability to stay in there for 10 minutes was always there. My body wasn't the weak link, my mind was. And furthermore, there was something incredibly empowering about going through these sorts of unpleasant, challenging experiences. They are an essential part of the human experience and can help you grow as a person. And so I began to develop this conviction. I felt like the iboga. Oh my god, I already forgot how to say it. Iboga.
Iboga.
All right, sorry. I felt like the iboga could have removed all my pain, but it purposely left me with some to deal with myself, because I had to learn how to handle being in pain. I began to think about my addiction, and I realized it was all fundamentally a result of my avoidance of pain and discomfort. And I felt this intense sense of tragedy, because I needed pain and discomfort. That in a way they're the most important medicine, the real teacher. I also realized that even if my goal was to minimize pain, drugs are just a bad strategy for accomplishing that. True that. True the fuck that. I could not sleep a wink for the following 3 days. I spent 90% of those 72 hours pacing and pacing and pacing and pacing. The sun would rise and I'd start walking laps around the facility. The sun would set and I'd pace circles around my room until it rose again. I'd only pause to drink water, eat, and use the restroom. All the unpleasant feelings I mentioned earlier, the restless leg, the dysphoria, the painful body sensations, the uncomfortable, overstimulated feeling, they all built up over the course of those 3 days. My thoughts became more and more dark and negative. In particular, I found myself getting extremely anxious at night, but I just kept pacing and pacing because as long as I was in motion, I could bear the weight of it all. I felt an extreme conviction that there was a yin and a yang, a sort of karmic Newton's third law. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. I had used kratom to steal comfort and pleasure for the present moment at the cost of my future self, and now the debt was due and I had to feel every bit of pain I'd put off. I not only had to, but I also needed to. I felt that this was what was supposed to happen and was an essential step in order for me to heal. At numerous points over those 3 days, I'd break down sobbing, thinking, "Oh my God, this is so bad. I've never been in worse pain. Jesus Christ, there's no way I can do this." And then I'd dust myself off and get back to pacing. Deep down, I know I could do it. In a sense, I felt as though I simply didn't have a choice. This was happening. I was going to live through it. There was no escape. I'd break down again, dust myself off again, get back to pacing. I grew more and more delirious from lack of sleep. My legs became stiff and sore. I developed a pronounced limp, but I kept pacing anyway. Bro, if he was using Sweatcoin during that, he could probably pay for fucking Amazon, like the actual company, buy it from Jeff Bezos. Alright, how much longer? Okay, a little bit longer. Finally, on the 3rd night post Ibogaine, dude, I'm seriously, I keep on, like, my mind keeps on forgetting.
Ibogaine.
I'm getting it right, okay. Ibogaine. Finally, on the 3rd night post Ibogaine, I slept a little bit. I'd gotten past the worst of it. I started to notice some small positive shifts. My anhedonia, which I had prior to doing Ibogaine, to be clear, was getting better. I found myself listening to and really enjoying music again. Goat by Polyphia went so hard in that state. It was crazy. My brain fog was better, my attention span was longer, and I had a libido again. A lot of these benefits persist to this day. I still felt like death, but not quite so bad, and I kept having these little noticeable experiences of things improving. Compared to before I did Ibogaine, and that really helped boost my morale. I distinctly remember an overwhelming sense of gratitude just for being able to sit still again, even though doing so was short-lived and required great effort. Anyway, I slept a little better the following night. Then the night after that, I did ayahuasca. Oh boy. I don't have too much to report on that experience. It was a pretty standard challenging ayahuasca trip. My ego wanted to die, but I had a hard time letting go. Extreme anxiety and fear. Lots of puking and diarrhea. I purged out every negative thought and emotion I've ever had. It was incredibly unpleasant. It was arguably the worst freakout I've ever had on a psychedelic. Honestly, do you guys think that's from just doing the Ibogaine and then the ayahuasca? I feel like that has something majorly to do with it. The morning after that, I smoked 5-MeO-DMT and had an amazing experience. Another obscure chemical. Shout out 5-MeO-DMT. I've done 2 videos of it on my main channel. Vivek has done a lot on it too. One of the most ones he covers too. So yeah, go check those out. But yeah, this is like so many psychedelics in a row. Your brain would be like, dude, what the fuck are you doing to me? I consider that trip to be the best experience of my entire life to this day. The best way I can describe it is being like nirvana in the true Buddhist sense of the word. I'm a secular Buddhist for the record. It brought me to a state of pure being, but beyond all craving and desire. There was nothing you could have changed about that experience to make it any better or any worse. It was the most at peace I've ever felt. To me, as a Buddhist, it was like getting to temporarily experience my understanding of what heaven is like. I'd never understood quite what I am aiming for with my meditation practice until that moment. Now I know exactly what the quote-unquote goal is. I know what I'm aiming for. I felt much better after smoking the toad of 5-MeO-DMT, if you guys did not know. My thoughts were a lot less negative, but I still was overstimulated, had trouble sleeping, felt uncomfortable in my body, etc., etc. Those feelings persisted for weeks afterward, very gradually diminishing. I ended up checking myself into a dual diagnosis mental health focused rehab about a month after my flood dose. I could tell I needed more help and to work on integration. That was definitely a good call, and by the time I left that rehab, I finally felt more or less normal again. It's now been 6 months since I did the Ibogaine, and I haven't touched kratom once since. Yay. One thing I only noticed while I was in rehab is how Ibogaine affected my cravings. The way I describe it is that there are two kinds of cravings. The intellectual understanding that if I do this drug, I will feel better, and a cognitive sensation akin to being hungry or horny. One is an idea, the other is a feeling. I still get the former, but ever since doing Ibogaine, I don't get the latter, ever, at all. In fact, every time I think about doing kratom, the first association I get is the dysphoria of my Ibogaine come down. I used to think of it and only imagine the immediate euphoria. Now it's come to Now it's come to represent pain refined. Sorry. It's lost all of its seductive luster. I've come to despise kratom more than almost anything else in my life, and that new perspective on my relationship to pain and challenge has stuck long term as well. Anyways, I'm actually going back to another round of Ibogaine and 5-MeO-DMT. I'm skipping the ayahuasca this time. Down to Mexico pretty soon here. I still have some post-acute withdrawal symptoms I'm hoping another dose will help relieve. So my first experience has just been on my mind a lot, and I figured it was about time I finally put into words and made a proper trip report to share. I get the sense reading about other people's experience that mine was an outlier in terms of how unpleasant it was. I think this is likely due to being underdosed because of my abnormal EKG. That being said, I honestly feel like I got exactly what I needed and I have zero regrets. I'm honestly grateful it was as unpleasant as it was, because learning I can withstand something so horrible was easily the most empowering, confidence-building experience I've ever had. At the end of the day, there's no easy, pain-free way out of addiction, and Ibogaine cured me where everything else failed. Please don't let this story scare you off of doing it if you need help getting clean, even if you have as hard of a time as me, which you most likely won't. It's worth it and you can do it. Trust me, there's a reason I'm willing to go back and do it all over again, although I suspect it will be a lot less unpleasant doing it already sober than with an opiate tolerance. Alright, that was a great story. There's no comments on it. Oh man, I wanted to read some. I wanted to hear what people had to say, but yeah, shout out that guy. The username was deleted, so whoever it was, shout out to you. Thank you for uploading that story to my channel. Honestly, I didn't think it as like too frightening. It was borderline, I'd say, but I'm gonna have to put it in this anyway because I already read it. I'm not gonna go back, but I guess you can label it as a frightening trip report, but you know, whatever. I mean, it doesn't really matter at this point. It was still a very interesting trip regardless. Like, now I'm very interested in learning more about it. I just knew the basic details, and I did not know how to pronounce it, apparently. How did I pronounce it? Ibogaine? I mean, who would have thought that? I mean, Ibogaine? Come on. Gain. Like, that's just, yeah. I'm sure people, you knew that, but I should know. I gotta read these, you know. Alright, I'm gonna be right back. I'm not gonna record myself peeing because I'm just gonna, since I don't have to fucking, it was more funny in the video, but now it's we don't need that in this one. Okay, I am back, and before I read the next story, I'm actually going to like do a little summary for it, because you know, these obscure drugs, I'm sure many of you don't know what they are. I won't go back to the Ibogaine because basically went into it already, but this next one is for 2CT7. Now, 2CT7 is a psychedelic phenethylamine of the 2C family. In his book, Pikal, A Chemical Love Story, Alexander Shulgin lists the dosage range as 10 to 30 milligrams. 2CT7 is generally taken orally and produces psychedelic and entactogenic effects that last 8 to 15 hours. 8 to 15 hours, that's a big difference. Up until Operation Web Trip and 3 deaths, 2 of which involved the use of other drugs in addition to 2CT7, and 1 which involved excessive insufflated dose, 2CT7 was sold commercially in Dutch and Japanese smart shops and online. It is known on the streets as Blue Mystic or Seventh Heaven. There has been little research done on the chemical other than Shulgin's comments in Pikel. I don't know if I'm saying that right, Pikel, or I don't know. And a few small animal studies, mostly armed at detecting metabolites. All right, that's all we'll read. Just a little summary for it, just so you guys can get like a brief understanding of what it is. But yeah. All right. This story actually isn't. Well, I'm on Arrowhead now, so yeah. I've been doing all my reports from my Reddit community, but yeah, this one will be from Arrowhead. Actually, the next two will be, maybe 3. All right, this is called Crisis Point 2C. Oh wait, I thought I had 2CT7. Oh, it's 2CT2. Son of a bitch. Well, now you know extra information. It's probably pretty much the same thing. Yeah, it's basically the same thing. I mean, it's Alexander Shulgin, first synthesized in 1981, rated by him as the magical half-dozen most important psychedelic phenethylamine compounds. The drug has structural and pharmacodynamic properties similar to those of 2CT7. All right. Well, I almost dropped my water. Okay. Yeah. All right. You get the point. I am an experienced user of phenethylamines, tryptamines, LSD, mushrooms, and salvia divinorum. My entheogen of choice is 2CE, but I decided to try another phenethylamine. Oh my god, I think I'm saying that wrong too. This is a bad look on my part. The haters are gonna have so much content. Phenethylamine. Oh yes, phenethylamine. That's, yeah. All right. I think, right? Is it phenethylamine?
Phenethylamine.
Yep. All right. I should have known that. Phenethylamine. Forget what I was saying. Not phenethylamine. I like saying it like that though. My entheogen of choice is 2CE, but I decided to try another phenethylamine after I received 400 milligrams of 2CT2 from my usual supplier. Unfortunately, I decided that the powder didn't look like 400 milligrams, and so took just under half of it. Yes, I know, big mistake. I was alone in my house. My wife was in America, and I took the powder 1850. Very interesting sentence there. Alone in my house and my wife was in America. 30 minutes in, I come up. The usual tracers and nice billowing patterns in the living room. This seems quite gentle and I'm enjoying the buzz. 1 hour in, I start tripping quite hard at this point, which surprises me because I'm used to a slow coming up time on phenethylamines. I close my eyes and begin to have vivid internal imagery of Mother Goddess figure. This is quite a common archetype for me, and I'm enjoying losing myself in the overwhelming sensation of a great nurturing mother. She is somehow connected to various women I know. The vision is beautiful. Hour and a half in, but this is where it starts to go wrong. First, my whole body begins to spasm. I simply can't stop the spasms throughout my torso, arms, and legs. Then I start to sweat profusely. Finally, I realize that my heart is hammering away. I have visions of it trying to burst out of my ribcage. I realize that I've overdosed. Question mark in. What happens from here is impossible to convey in language, but it translates like this. The sensation of leaving my body is overwhelming. I am simply somewhere else. It is dark, and there are telepathic voices. I realize I am about to die, that my consciousness is about to be dissolved. I feel something like shock and explain that I'm only 37, and this can't be right. A calm, gentle, even loving voice tells me, and this will stay with me for the rest of my life, that it doesn't matter. It is simply my time to go. My consciousness must relinquish my ego and join something else. I am scared, but I am ready to accept this. However, I have a massive, overwhelming urge to say goodbye to my wife and tell her I love her and that I'm so very sorry. This seems to put me back in my body, although I have very limited motor control. I lurch and stumble to the phone and call 999, blab my address, and say, overdose. Then somehow dial my wife's sister in America. She answers, but my wife hasn't arrived at her place yet. I think I tell her to say that I'm sorry and that tell Wendy, my wife, that I love her. Next thing, the doorbell rings. I pull the door open. The paramedics are inside the house and I'm carried out to the ambulance with an IV in my vein. I can't remember anything else until coming around in the hospital. I have no idea what the time is, but I'm still tripping wildly. Whatever they've put me into has calmed me down, but my heart still seems to be racing. I'm hooked up in a cubicle in accident and emergency. I stayed there for what seems like several hours, being monitored and watching the happenings of an A&E department while still under the surreal influence of the drug. I realize I'm going to be okay and calm down a little. After several assessments and ECGs, I'm taken to a ward for the night in the morning, and I'm okay. I'm disoriented and my heart still seems to be skipping, but I'm discharged by midday. The doctor happy that it's more or less out of my system and that I'm at no further risk. I'm offered an interview with the psychiatric team, but decline. Yeah, you don't need it, you just fucked up. You need a psychiatric slap in the fucking face. Obviously, taking such a large overdose was a pretty stupid thing to do, you think? It could certainly have killed me, and I certainly will not be doing it again. However, in retrospect, I'm grateful that the experience happened to me. It brought me to a crisis point where I was confronted with the imminent dissolution of my consciousness. It is an indescribable moment of epiphany where it was made clear that you are about to die and be made into something else, something lacking in individuality. It is at once both terrifying and reassuring, but also it made me see, for perhaps the first time, how much I love my wife and want to spend my remaining life with her. I know this sounds a bit trite and sentimental, but the all-encompassing love for her was all I could think about at the point of crisis. But please, measure your doses accurately. That's from 2008. You know, the best Arrowwood trip reports come from like before the 2010, you know. Back when Arrowwood was, Arrowwood's still badass, but like back when its infancy is, well, it'd be like its teenage years. Alright, but I thought that was a good story, a good life lesson right there. The one lesson, couple lessons. The one, don't fucking be an idiot and take massive amounts of a psychedelic that is very strong that you don't know anything about. Well, did he say he knew anything about it? Either way, it doesn't matter. Do not do that. Also, value the important things in life. Sometimes drugs make you realize that, hey, there's something important in my life and I need to keep it. And I just haven't realized that. And yeah, I mean, that could be beneficial for it too. Or it could go the other way around, where you think someone is actually being a friend, a good person, you know, your loving wife or husband, and then you realize they're a piece of shit. It can go either way, but either way, it's going to be beneficial for you in the long run. But yeah, that's what I gotta say about that story. But we're gonna go into the next one. This one, there's a whole bunch of chemicals that they took. Jesus Christ. Well, it's just all okay. So it's 4-ACO-DIPT. Now I've done 4-ACO-DMT on my main channel. I've done it. No, I've done stories and had Vivek help me with that. And yeah, shout out him again. We're just shouting out Vivek this whole time. Alright, forgive me if I pronounce this whole thing wrong. 4-acetoxy-NN disopropyltryptamine. Close enough, right? They call it 4-ACE, is a lesser-known psychedelic substance of the tryptamine chemical class that produces a unique mixture of physically euphoric, stimulating, and atypical minimal visual and introspective psychedelic effects when administered. It has been described in early online reports as being only vaguely similar to structurally related tryptamine substances such as psilocin or 4-ACO-DMT, but with the disinhibiting, physically euphoric, and libidinous signature of psychedelics like 5-MeO-DIPT, and an atypically short duration of around 3 to 4 hours. Okay, that's a good sign. If you want to do it, like, at least you know it's not going to last long. It has been since reported to be slightly longer lasting, and mildly less potent than 4-HO-DIPT, also known as ibuprofen, with an active dose reported between 15 and 40 milligrams. Alright, I guess I'll just read the rest of this. 4-ACO-DIPT is primarily thought to act as a prodrug to 4-HO-DIPT, a substance with which Alexander Shulgin comments on in his book Tychel. So there's a pikel and a Tychel. I've heard those before. I just did not look up the pronunciations clearly for anything before this video. In it, he writes that he truly doubts that there's another psychedelic drug anywhere that can match this one for speed, for intensity, for brevity, and sensitive to dose. At least one that is active orally. Anecdotal reports dating from at least 1999 reveals that these properties are largely preserved with 4-ACO-DIPT, with the exception of a less rapid and potentially jarring onset, slightly extended duration, and decreased physical side effects from the excessive stimulation and restlessness that 4-HO-DIPT is commonly reported to produce, making it a more comfortable experience overall. Today, 4-ACO-DIPT is rarely able to be acquired on the consumer market, and when it is almost exclusively distributed as a gray area research chemical online for recreational and proclaimed entheogenic purposes. It is an example of the early wave of psychedelic research chemical that were explored following the wake of its initial synthesis and documentation in Tycho, before the emergence of an easily accessible network of these online research chemical vendors during the early 2000s. Very little data exists about the pharmacological properties, metabolism, and toxicity of 4-ACO-DIPT. Users are advised to proceed with caution when choosing to use this substance. Shout out to Psychonaut Wiki for doing that. They did a lot more than actual Wikipedia when I tried to grab a link. But yeah, very good website. If you guys want to learn more about this stuff, there's so many. They got everything on there. So it's going to tell you more than what Wikipedia says. It'll say what Wikipedia says and then some more. But yeah, this is 4-ACO-DIPT, Adverse Reactions called by Igor. On the day in question, tripping was the farthest thing from my mind. I had spent afternoon walleye fishing at a local lake, drank a few beers, and smoked a joint while I was out. As the sun was beginning to set, my friend B showed up and wanted to know if I was down to trip. I was in a good mood, so I said sure, and we proceeded to leave the lake and decide on the sacrament for the evening. We settled on 4-ACO-DIPT. I was then informed that we did not have a good place to utilize that night. We thought we would have to postpone the activities for another day. That is not how it worked out, though. Soon B's friend R called him up and wanted us to go party at his apartment that night. We had somewhere to go. Me and B drove over to R's apartment only to find several other people there already drinking and smoking some bowls. 3 of the 5 people that were there had to leave, so it was down to me, B, R, and R's friends, X and Z. X and Z had only limited experience with psychedelics, so me and B got the job of explaining what the weird gray powder in the vial was. We told them it was an analog of psilocybin and explained how the effects differed. We chose to start X and Z on 10 milligrams, each to see how they felt about the chemical without committing to a high dose. B and I, however, are very experienced with the chem in question, so we settled at 35 milligrams each to start with, and gave R 25 milligrams, as he has a lot of trip time under his belt, but not yet with ipracetyl. Okay, that was another word for it. I just did not feel like reading it, but it's IPRACETYL. Ipracetyl, maybe. I don't know. There's probably some fucking chemist in my comment section saying how bad I'm pronouncing these. I'm sorry. I hate when I mispronounce words, but it's these fucking chemicals, man. I don't know. There's some of them are just so long, and I just never heard of them before, but yeah. All right. We proceeded to smoke a few bowls while waiting for the effects to manifest. After about 30 minutes, me, B, and R began to have effects becoming apparent. X and Z were still not feeling anything, but they were on a low dose, so this was no big surprise. X and Z began to drink beer at a very rapid rate, which we had already advised against, and Z soon became slightly ill. When Z went to vomit, I became slightly concerned, but he came out of the bathroom feeling better and laughing hysterically. X soon began to get altered also. Once we all had effects present, we decided to smoke some more pot and see where it would take us. See, that I have major gripes against that shit when you're doing psychedelics and you want to go further, like, especially with something you don't know what's going to happen. Like, they thought they knew, but smoking weed will not make it better. You'd have to do like a low dose maybe, but yeah, I don't know. That just sounds like the last thing you want to do. After the bowls, we did the dumbest thing imaginable. We went to the liquor store to go get more beer, and at the spur of the moment, we decided it would be fun to do some off-roading in X's 1980 Buick. Oh god. We decided to go to a local canyon and see what we could find to drive on, over or through. R began to get ill in the car, and we had to stop so he could puke. He had taken down about 8 beers at this point, so we returned to his apartment. We got back, smoked another bowl, and we were all feeling well again. I decided to take a booster dose to extend my trip, so I took another 20 milligrams of 4-ACO-DIPT. B decided to follow suit and do the same. B and I were feeling great, no nausea at all. X and Z still had a good buzz going and decided not to supplement their doses. R opted for another 10 milligrams. While waiting for the booster doses to take effect, I wanted to smoke some low-potency 5-time salvia extract. Okay, so before I continue, like when I read salvia reports, I don't know if it's 5 times or is it 5x, like whatever extract it is it like you say X or times? Just let me know in the comments if you guys know. I took the first hit and it instantly increased the intensity of the trip 10 times from what it was. I had massive CEVs of futuristic landscapes and physically felt very compressed for lack of a better term. As I slowly came out of the salvia experience, R wanted to take a hit of it. We agreed to let him, though only a small amount since he had only smoked it once before this. I have a bad feeling about this. I have a bad feeling. I loaded about 100 milligrams of the extract and let him hit it. Immediately, he began repeating, "Oh my god, holy shit," as soon as the hit was exhaled. R soon began to lose all contact with reality. He was talking about fucking trees, and the word, or was he talking about fucking trees or like fucking trees? And the words that inhabit and control us, the worms that inhabit and control us, and all kinds of weird shit. Luckily, he began to regain coherency rapidly. By this point, it was like 2 a.m., about 6 hours since the first dose. X and Z decided they were going to retire for the night and get some sleep. It was then that I made my mistake. I decided to insufflate at 5 milligram and take 25 more orally. 4-ACO DIPT does not burn, but the drip is vile. The drip will burn, dude, I'm telling you, dripping is bad. I was feeling the small insufflated dose within about 10 minutes. I was then beginning to get very high, and the 25 milligrams oral had yet to even kick in. It was at this point I knew it was going to get rough. R offered me some valerian hop tea to try to take the edge off a bit. The tea tasted terrible, I presume due to the valerian content, but I chugged it anyway. If you guys have never tasted valerian, oh, it is nasty. It is fucking, ugh. It is worse than the drip, I'll tell you. As the physical stimulation was getting uncomfortable, I was still getting higher and beginning to worry a bit. I know that worrying will only make it worse, but I took way too much of an unknown substance, so a bit of concern was to be expected. About 30 minutes after taking the last dose, I began to feel remarkably ill. I ran to the bathroom and proceeded to violently vomit for a few minutes. The vomit tasted like bile and feet. After puking, I tried to drink some water and took an electrolyte pill to get rehydrated. I was beginning to get ill again within a few minutes. B got out the bowl and we smoked in hopes of settling my stomach. It failed. I was beginning to get surges, like small amounts of electric shock in my stomach, which were quite ominous. I was now beginning to get nervous. The surges were increasing in both intensity and frequency, coinciding with my heartbeat. My pulse was 139 beats per minute and very hard. I was getting a headache now, beginning to have minor leg tremors. Shit was really going downhill at this point. I was again violently nauseous and had R bring me a bucket, as I was not particularly mobile at this point. I just dry heaved. There was very little to vomit at this point in the night. The surges were turning into more of a stabbing pain, synchronous with my pulse and very frightening. And to make things worse, I was still getting alarming leg tremors also. I was beginning to show minor seizures next. My eyes were trying very hard to roll back in my head. I was getting worse and worse tremors and pains. I am not a religious person, but for the first time in years, I felt the need to pray for my survival. B and R were getting noticeably concerned at the symptoms I had. I was really beginning to question the likelihood of me surviving the night. I then had what has been described as a full-blown grand mal seizure. I lost all connection to the world. Next thing I know, I am in darkness. Nothing. Purgatory of sorts. I thought I was dead, but soon a faceless voice was telling me to fight. I could beat this. I could survive. I begin to come back to reality as I am being hit with ice water to pull me from the seizure. B and R are quite happy to see me regaining consciousness. B had his phone on and was about to dial 911. I soon had them telling me to drink this water, don't stand up, stay where you are, etc., as they were still concerned about me having more seizures. The tremors were still present, but the chest pain had subsided. R soon dug around and found me a cyclobenzaprine, 20 milligrams, in an attempt to stop the seizures. As we waited to see if the muscle relaxer would take effect, we smoked another bowl. I was beginning to feel a lot better by the time the pill kicked in, which was very fast due to an empty stomach. B and R were very interested in trying to decipher the OBE I had experienced. Out-of-body experience? We came to the conclusion that I was hearing them, and due to the dissociated state, I was unable to tell it was them. I was so happy that the nightmare was ending. I did not touch a psychedelic for 3 or 4 months after that night. I am thankful to have survived the night. After doing the math the next day, I realized I had taken 85 milligrams of 4-ACO-DIPT the previous night. The dose I took was way too high for the substance. I have several 50 milligrams in a cap experience. I have several 50 milligram in a cap experiences with ipracetal, but none have shown the toxicity this one did. Before that night, I had felt no toxicity from either 4-ACO-DIPT or 4-HO-DIPT. I flushed my remaining 4-ACO-DIPT and got back to my normal life. I was weak for 3 days or so afterward, but just happy to be alive. I feel very lucky due to the fact that I did everything I could have wrong, but still came out of it okay. It is amazing how much a near-death experience can change your outlook on life. The following week, I started preparations to start my tackle business. I wanted to do work I didn't loathe. Life is too short to sit at a job you can't stand every day, all day. This showed me what I really wanted to be doing, and I took the message to heart. This is from 2004. Wow. They published in 2007, but yeah. 4-ACO-DIPT. What'd you guys think about that story? I mean, that was something. I thought it was gonna end up being a lot worse. I'm sure they could have went into more detail with it, but that's okay. But yeah, that was a good one. All right, I'm actually just gonna read this last one. I've had requests to do this, and I've planned to do it. I've had these stories set, but I'm just gonna do it here. The next one we are going to be doing is called Mandrake. It is the root of a plant historically derived either from plants of the genus Mandragora in the Sileniaceae family, found in the Mediterranean region, or from other species such as Birona alba. The English mandrake in the Cucurbitaceae, family, or the American mandrake. I'm not going to try that, which have similar properties. The plants from which the root is obtained are also called mandrakes. Mediterranean mandrakes are perennial herbaceous plants with ovate leaves arranged in a rosette, a thick upright root, often branched and bell-shaped flowers followed by yellow or orange berries. They have been placed in different species by different authors. They are highly variable perennial herbaceous plants with long, thick roots, often branched and almost no stem. The leaves are borne in a basal rosette and are variable in size and shape, with a maximum length of 45 centimeters, 18 inches. They are usually either elliptical in shape or wider towards the end, obovate, with varying degrees of hairiness. Yes, it is very toxic as tropane alkaloids, so it is anticholinergic. It is a deliriant, so that's what makes this very interesting to do. I actually bought Mandrake in Boston. They just had it at the store, so I fucking bought it. I don't know. I gotta find it. Maybe I should do it. No, I'm not gonna do it. But you never know. All right, this is called Mistaken Package. Ooh, Mandrake. Well, this was heavy shit, as you might expect. Last summer, I received 100 grams of dried mandragora root, powdered. I had another 100 gram powdered of ephedra, and three times I took mandrake as ephedra, making a mistake with the package. A huge mistake. The memories of these experiences are quite blurry. After 5 months, I've started to recollect these details. Last summer was a very hallucinogenic one for me, taking datura, bergmansia, ayahuasca, salvia, Syrian rue, brunfelsia, and mandragora. After having some time sober, the memories slowly surface. At first, I made tea with 6 grams, drank it, and waited for the effects. Since I had no experience on ephedra, had no idea about what to expect from it. The first effects came, and it wasn't nice. Mouth dry as hell, sleepy and nauseous. I smoked some salvia divinorum. I'd intended to boost salvia with ephedra, and totally flipped out. I ran around my apartment thinking I was an eagle ready to take off. I was about to jump out the window, but luckily came back to my senses. We've all seen that video on my main channel where the guy jumped out the window. Yeah, lucky to be alive, right? My home was not the same place anymore. Something in the linear sense of myself and surroundings had changed dramatically. The nausea faded little by little. I went out to walk and enjoy nature and felt good. Then I went to sleep. I made another tea, this time with 15 grams. This is the experience hardest to remember. Most of it has remained total blackout. I was eager to try. Oh my god. I was eager to dry ephedra again. Try ephedra? I don't know. Dry ephedra. Read that 15 grams would be a strong dose. With mandragora, this may be a lethal one. After drinking the tea, which tasted all but pleasant, I started to feel very nauseous with the usual side effect, dry mouth and throat. I did it to myself again. A thought occurred that I might die, but don't worry, it's only ephedra, was my response to it. This may be the reason for staying alive. This is the part I've remembered afterwards. The effects reminded me so much of other tropane-bearing plants, Brugmansia and Datura, that I thought this was a flashback or the stuff wasn't ephedra. I was tripping for sure and decided to go with it. Also, ephedra is basically ephedrine. It's the main chemical, I think, inside of it, or that's how they, different, but it's basically, I think that's from the main plant source for it. It's a ephedra plant. So yeah, ephedrine. I remembered what my friend who I hadn't seen for 2 years had said about his Datura trip. It lasted for 2 days. Suddenly he was there with me. We talked for a while. I can't recall the details of our conversation, but I remember finding myself mumbling insanities all alone like walking up from a dream. This happened again. I don't know how many times or if there were some other people too. I was worried if my landmark living downstairs heard me freaking out. I fell asleep at some point. In the morning, everything was okay except my kidneys. They hurt. Since I didn't remember the delirium caused by my last tea, I tried it again. Oh my god. This third experience with false ephedra was not so heavy. A strong tolerance had developed with the 2 previous. It was quite peaceful, but my body didn't take it. Meridians got stuck. I tried to meditate, but felt like going in circles without getting anywhere. The kidneys were painful afterwards again. There's not much to say about this one. Perhaps nothing special happened, or just another blackout. Like this written account depicts, I felt indifferent, and still do when looking back to that night. Shortly after the 3rd dose of lunacy, I discovered the mistake of taking mandragora as ephedra. I was terrified. I could have died. I had made sure about what were in those bags, so I thought, was it the magical power of mandragora that made me mistake for those 3 times? It must be something like that. I'm always careful with magic herbs, but 3 times? Or was it my stupidity? Perhaps. I don't know if it's caused by mandragora, datura, or brugmansia or other plants I've taken, but my daily life has changed dramatically. I hear voices. Schizophrenia? I see visions. I have this thing I call mental television, like an inner eye. The voices are more like thoughts that are not mine than sounds. I see they come from another source, though my feelings mold them. I could stop them at will, but sometimes they're like raging demons and make me feel very uneasy. If I listen very hard with my inner ear, I start to hear people talking. Spirits? Sometimes voices around me like my steps seem to talk. Am I a sorcerer? A madman? Some of you who may think I'm an idiot, or some others who don't might be envious. Don't. There's another world besides ours, but I've seen they don't always go hand in hand. These voices, for example, they lie. I'm used to this, but it's still confusing. One needs the spirit of a warrior to get by amidst all of this. Never give up. So before you try Silencier, think twice, and if you do a small dosage. When you've done it, wait a while before doing it again. Time will show you more about the effects. They're not just one-night joyride. Alright, we got through 4 stories, baby. What's up? Those were some long ones. The last one wasn't very long, but all the other ones were pretty good. That first, Ibogaine, I almost forgot how to pronounce it again. That one was... I have to say that one was my favorite. Which one was your guys' favorite? I mean, leave it in the comment section below. Hopefully most of you have fallen asleep. I don't know if I'm going to name this video to fall asleep to, but it's going to be obscure something. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, that was obscure trip reports to fall asleep to. I guess I'm gonna name it. I'm gonna put the I guess after it too. I'm gonna just add everything. I'm just gonna keep on typing whatever I'm saying right now, and that'll be the title. Could you imagine that? I just keep on typing everything I'm saying and put that into the title, and you have to click on it, be like, damn, I can't even read what the hell the title's saying. But there's a fucking character limit to the title, so what are you gonna do? All right, I'm gonna stop this before it gets to an hour. I was hoping it would go over an hour, but I'm not gonna keep talking for it to continue, even though I probably could. All right, have a good night and stay safe out there. Don't do stupid shit.